I've done a little bit of work to this 280S. I put a new alternator belt on it. I only put one there. It's supposed to run two. One from the crank that goes to the water pump and an alternator, and one that goes from the alternator to the water pump only. But I'll explain that later why I only chose to do one. I just put a new thermostat in it. Unfortunately, one of the bolts was seized and snapped. This only really needs 2 bolts to hold it, but there's 3. The new thermostat, because the other one was opening at about 60. And I was having a look in the radiator and it's looking a bit blocked. It's leaking a bit over here, so I'll have to pull that out eventually and get it rodded and resoldered. Oh, I forgot to mention that the air conditioning belt, which the aircon has no gas at all in it, and the power steering belt had been replaced recently, but I left a manky old water pump alternator belt. It's a little silly, isn't it? I don't know if you can see that, but there's quite a bit of debris stuck in the core. So if that's what you can see, imagine what you can't see. So hopefully you can handle the new thermostat, because might not be able to cool it off. We'll see. Good thing it's coming into winter. Well, these are the 2 alternator belts. So this one went to the crank around the water pump into the alternator. This one went from alternator to water pump. Bit of a strange setup, but spreads the load between the 2 pulleys. But, this is a 9.5A, and that's a 10A, even though it's worn down to nothing. It's worn down to like an 8. But all you can get is 11As these days, so to get the perfect tension on it will pretty much be impossible. So if this one's too tight, then you'll never tension this one. If this one's too tight, you'll never tension this one. So I figured one 11A would do the trick. You can all see it's a bit haggard. Yeah, cracks everywhere in it. And this one was just burnt out. There's thin spots all over it. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it thins right out here. Nasty. Now this is the old thermostat, and you can see it's not closing properly. You can see a little bit of light coming through. So there's a fair bit of water flow going through that. And the spring's pretty weak. It's time for a new one. I'm giving this thing an oil change. As you see, it needs it. But one thing most people forget is to drain the oil cooler on these. So if you change the oil in the sump, as soon as you start it up, it just circulates the dirty oil from the cooler straight back through the filter. And yeah, kind of pointless. So always drain the oil cooler. So it does hold a fair bit of oil. Let that drain for a while, then I'll drain the sump. Smells nice and old, this oil. Well, the oil cooler's almost drained out, so that's how much it came out. There's a fair bit of sludgy stuff that you don't want to mix back with fresh oil. So, always drain the oil cooler if you can. Well, there we go. That's all the oil drained out of this. A fair bit came out. I let it drain for 24 hours, flushed a little bit through until it came out clean at the bottom. Yeah, drained the oil cooler, everything. So, it's going to take a bit to refill it. I might crank it a bit to get oil pressure up before it starts. And hopefully I get time to grease it tonight. This is the grease I use and recommend. Inox MX8. So, it's really good grease. That's that red stuff. Don't get that lid off one-handed. There we go. Good grease. So I load that into my grease gun and go play with some nipples. Well, I gave it a grease. Most of the nipples worked, except for the one underneath where I couldn't get grease into the bottom at all. down there. I took the nipple out. The nipple was clear, but it just wouldn't get grease into the actual joint, which sucks. I've had a check over the front here. Needs new front pads, because yeah, that one's worn right down to pretty much nothing. You can see there. The caliper's seized on this side. That side's free-ish. Probably have to machine these discs because they're glazed. So then we'll have to do the wheel bearings. And if the discs don't need replacing, there's a bit of a lip on them, but it should be alright. Front brake hoses. And drag link, because you can see the movement. You can hear it. It's up there at the drag link where it connects up to the pitman arm. So it needs a little bit of TLC. Well, on the driver's side we've got a nice new tie rod end in there, right next to the screwed drag link. That's where it's stuffed. We have a leaky shocker. No grease on this side either. Brakes aren't quite as seized on this side. But what I find amusing is, have a look at how far this is sitting out. And this bolt, or nut here for it, and look. Yeah, that's just not good. I'll tighten that up before I go for a test drive. And as I say, this thing was supposedly just serviced and checked. And none of this stuff seems to be on the report.